So I'm going to teach Mr. Rogers style. If anybody's got, I could wear the sweater. I'm going to sit in this cool chair. This is going to be a kind of house church style. So it's pretty loud. I think I got people. I can't turn it down, so I don't know.
It's hard to tell from back there.
Yeah. You can't see it. Okay. Lower, 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 lower. Probably. Still turn him off. Now we want duct tape around his mouth and put him in the closet. Okay. So my hope for this weekend is for it to be an interactive time. So I prepared the slide deck and the teaching content, all that stuff. But there's going to be time for discussion questions. So I really actually want you to interact with those, obviously. I didn't hand out verses or anything, but there are going to be things, passages on the screen that I would love help reading. I don't have the juice that I once had, so I don't like talking for a long time anymore, which is good for you in some way. But yeah, so when I ask someone to read, I'll just let you guys pop up and do that. This is a retreat. We're among friends. Just jump in and do that. If not, I guess I'll call on folks. So we're going to be looking at the story, really, if you've been around the church, a pretty famous, one of the most famous, if not the most famous, the prodigal, often called the prodigal son, which is an inaccurate title, but that's what it's known as, the prodigal son. Let's start out this way. When you see the word prodigal, what does that word mean in your mind? Don't worry about being wrong or whatever. Probably most of us are going to be, just put it that way. Prodigal. Chosen one. Okay? Other thoughts?
Knowledgeable.
Knowledgeable? That's like prodigy. Yeah. You are wrong. We're all wrong. What else? Prodigal. Wayward. Probably the most famous one, or the most common way people understand the word prodigal is wayward. Anybody else?
I would say that outside the Christian setting,
Yeah.
prodigal doesn't mean that much to me.
Prodigal doesn't get used, right? So, yeah, we don't have much context for this probably other than this story, actually. Most people think of it as wayward, referring to wayward, but actually the word prodigal, and you can look this up if you want to, it means something. It might be hard to read that from back there, but it means some kinds of recklessly extravagant or wastefully extravagant. And what I want us to discover in this story is really the story of the prodigal ultimately, and I owe Tim Keller all the credit for this insight in his the story. This parable is ultimately about the recklessly extravagant love of God the Father, demonstrated to two sons who had wandered far from their father's heart. So that's kind of what we're going to explore. We got 3 teachings. We're going to look at some of those things. Again, I already said this, but please try to just follow along. Don't read ahead. You're already familiar with the story, but I mean, if you want to, I'm not going to shoot you or anything like that. There's no zappers. Although I always think, I think teachers zappers for the kids. I've been trying to get that pushed through. If we want to get somebody on the school board and get that, I think we should all have the kids have little zapper or little things on, and each teacher gets to push the button once a day. We don't want teachers going crazy. Just once a day, you get to zap someone. So we could hand that out in this crowd too. That would be fun. Anyway, so try to follow along. Just stay in the moment with the text. I want to try, and it's really hard to do, but I want us to try to let this story, this parable, hit us as close as the way it hit the original audience. Remember, they were not reading it originally. Jesus spoke it, and there were people listening, and they'd never heard this story before. The word prodigal is never used in this story at all. It's something we put on it. So let's let it do that. So this story, this parable, is given in a context, and the context starts way back in Luke 15. So the parable of the two sons, the two lost sons, starts in verse 13. But the setting, the reason for Jesus shared this story starts in Luke 15, 1 and 2. So somebody read that for us.
All the tax collectors and sinners were approaching to listen to him. And the Pharisees and scribes were complaining, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them."
Okay, so that's your setting. Tax collectors and sinners approaching Jesus to listen to him. Pharisees and scribes were complaining. Right away, those who heard this word would have had something stirred in them. So it always makes you feel powerful when you can put languages nobody reads on the board. So this word, dia gongudzo. You've heard the word. If you've been around the village and heard me teach about Psalms and some different places, this word gongudzo shows up a lot. It's like a word. It's one of the only Greek. I studied a year of Greek, enough to be a totally dangerous person who should, as I teach about Greek words right now. But this word gongudzo, it kind of sticks with me. It's like, man, what a guttural, like deep word. Gongudzo means to grumble or murmur. And this, because the prefix dia is put, that means through, so it means to grumble. This murmuring is going through the crowd. These Pharisees and scribes are upset. They're spreading, they're grumbling, they're murmuring among the people. They're really upset that Jesus is receiving and eating with and hanging out with tax collectors and sinners. This word would have stirred in the word used in the Septuagint. That's a fancy word there. Septuagint's a word for the Greek translation of the Old Testament. So it's the word that was used to describe the Israelite people who were grumbling constantly. They were gongudzoing constantly in the wilderness with God, upset with their leaders. I mean, just constantly gongudzo mania was going on with these folks. So when the audience hears or reads this word, whenever they were actually reading the text, when Luke was setting it up, it would bring that to mind. It's a pretty famous, powerful word. So we probably know this some, but let's get everybody involved to start with. Why might the Pharisees and scribes have been grumbling that tax collectors and sinners were approaching Jesus? There's a variety of reasons, probably. What do you think? Why are they so upset? They're not just a little bit ticked and spreading their tickedness amongst the people.
I just saw this now, which probably means it's totally correct, but I noticed that the Pharisees are around Jesus a lot, and I think we always think they are like just these haters, but they also were around them all the time, and if I hate someone, I usually don't try and be around them. So one thought that is, again, probably not correct, but maybe they wanted to hear what he had to say, whether they wanted to disagree with it, see if it was good, and these people were kind of getting in the way that they normally think about.
So maybe kind of a sense of, hey, we're the ones who've reserved the front row seats. Yeah. You know, get these people out of here. They're taking our spots. We need to hear from the rabbi, this famous, popular rabbi. They don't have any place here. That could have been part of it. What else?
Well,
go ahead, Andrew, you go, and then Randy, were you talking? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, if I understand how tax collectors were viewed at this time, they were really not liked by the people.
Yeah.
Because they kind of sold out to the Roman government. People's money, oftentimes being wealthy off these people's money, the Jewish people's money.
Yeah.
And giving it to the oppressors or the Roman.
Yeah.
The Roman oppressors.
Yeah, the tax collectors, or they're also referred to as tax farmers. They were literally Jewish folks who had people. They had betrayed their people, gone against them, sold out, as Andrew said, to the Romans. And the way that worked is you would buy the contract to collect taxes from the Roman government, and then you had to meet that quota, and then anything you collected above the quota was, it's like your not commission would be the wrong word probably, but like your profits, I guess, that you could keep for yourself. And so these people were they probably, this wasn't a misnomer or a bad, these people were pretty corrupt, and the people did not like them. They were viewed as the people but unfaithful to God. What other thoughts you guys have?
I think it was, the Pharisees probably felt like they were losing their place in authority, that here's the worst of these people were comfortable coming to Jesus, and they were only supposed to go to the Pharisees.
So it's trouble not just with the tax collectors, it's trouble with Jesus as well, because good religious rabbi teacher folks don't hang out with these folks. Jesus is. This is no good. This is going to be a bad precedent. Everything is going to hell in a handbasket real fast if we let this stand. Okay? What do you think was the Pharisees and scribes' biggest problem? Like, if you had to boil it down, let's say some of you in this room are counselors or therapists or whatever. If you had to get down to the problem with these guys, what would you say it is? And I don't know that there's just one right answer on this.
I would wonder if it's because Pharisees and scribes, like their entire career in life was knowing the Old Testament law, following those laws, all this stuff. Jesus is coming in now, following the Jewish laws to a T, like they.
Not the way they thought it should.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. But he himself is Jewish, born Jewish,
Right.
and he's teaching a whole different. So, I don't know where I was going with that. That was the biggest problem. Is like there's a guy that's now become teaching things that are outside of the Jewish law and Jewish.
Yeah. And so, to be fair to them, like I heard Michael trying to be fair to the poor Pharisees, they probably get a little worse of a rap than they deserve. In their mind, they are, I think, the benefit of the doubt, they're trying to be faithful to God. And so they're seeing that Jesus is doing is unfaithful to God. It's blasphemous. It's distrusting. It's slapping him in the face. We should not associate with these sinners, these unclean people. And it'll make you unclean if you're around them. So how could you be a trusted, godly, holy rabbi if you're around nasty people? Okay. What other thoughts? What would you say? Yeah.
He's kind of swimming against the flow, like the Pharisees and scribes, like sinners would be sometimes not even allowed into the temple.
No, definitely not. Yeah.
And nobody wanted to associate with them, and then all of a sudden Jesus is like, oh yeah, I accept you. And so he's he's causing a little bit of a problem because he's starting to make people think, oh, maybe this is not right what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, he's kind of flipping things up on their heads a little bit. The people who are supposed to be close to God are the ones he's having trouble. Pharisees, scribes, others, and the people who are supposed to be the furthest away from God are the ones he's allowing near. It's just messing with their whole worldview.
And I think they probably saw him as a legitimate teacher then because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, bad enough they kept doing different things to try to trap him, and then we know how the story ends. Having him killed. Somebody else.
I wonder if they were afraid of losing power.
Okay. I think there's definitely part of that. Go ahead, sorry. That's it. For sure. Pretty much.
But it's because Jesus was gaining popularity.
Yeah.
So they might have just been a little afraid of their own standing in society.
Yeah, good old-fashioned envy and jealousy, afraid of losing power, control, etc.
It seems that they're elevating themselves above. They're other people.
They're othering this, is that what you said? Yeah.
They're trying to use the other group, and so they are lesser and lesser. And
Yeah.
it's not, I like that you pointed out, but the tax collectors, they were trained.
Yeah.
They were corrupt.
We would not have liked them.
Yeah, they weren't really suck. But the issue was the Pharisees thought they were better. They didn't see that. No, they're on sin, that they want to change.
Yeah.
And so looking down on others as though they themselves don't have to do sacrifices for their own sin.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's hitting at what I would probably say which is they've wandered from and they've forgotten the Father's heart. They've forgotten God's loving, merciful heart, and as Jason was just talking about, their own desperate need for mercy. And as we do that, I mean, a real short journey from that to us looking unfavorably upon judging others. It totally kills love. Okay. Oh, did you? Go ahead.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, too, like, Jesus held the Pharisees accountable for what the Jewish people did.
Mm.
And they saw Jesus causing problems. There's probably some fear there, too, of
Losing control of
Yeah.
society and
being
Yeah.
punished for,
Romans. You've heard me say this before, probably, but the Romans, other than having power and wealth and all that stuff, the top priority for the Roman people and the emperors was social control. They wanted things. Get in trouble with the Roman Empire was through upsetting the apple cart, through things not being ordered. They were order people. That's one reason why they made all those incredible laws that are kind of the foundation for our nation's laws, etc. So yeah, Jesus is kind of stirring. So nobody really likes it. And the Pharisees and scribes, yeah, they don't like it because they think they're worse than them, because they've forgotten the Father's merciful heart, which is kind of what we're going to study this whole weekend. Okay, somebody read this for us, verses 3, and then you're going to go on to the next slide, just as a heads up.
So he told them this parable. What man among you who has 100 sheep and loses one of them does not leave the 99 in the open field and go after the lost one, until he finds it? When he has found it, he joyfully puts it in his shoulder. Coming home, he calls his friends and neighbors together, saying to them,
Rejoice, sorry. Rejoice with me.
With me, because I have found my lost sheep. I tell you, in the same way, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over people who don't need repentance.
Okay, so first parable he tells, not the parable of the two lost sons, so not the one we're going to study, but it fits in the context. So a guy has 100 sheep, loses one, he'll leave the 99 and go after the lost one and be filled with joy over the lost one. It's a story of the owner, the shepherd, whatever, going after the sheep desperately, passionately, extravagantly, and being filled with joy when he finds it. It's pretty simple. The next story, the next parable is this. Somebody read this one.
Or what woman who has 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? When she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together, saying, Rejoice with me, because I found the silver coin that I lost. In the same way, there is joy in the presence of God's angels over one sinner who repents.
Similar, it's not hard to see it, very similar theme to the first parable. It's a story of something valuable being lost, and it being celebrated that goes and searches for the lost thing and is filled with joy when the lost thing or person or sheep or coin, whatever, is found. So it's important just to kind of know that, because then we get into our parable. Our parable starts actually in verse 11, not 13, I was wrong. He also said, a man had 2 sons. So this is a story that fits in the context of what we're just talking about. Pharisees, scribes, gonguzoing away, grumbling and whining, thinking they're better. I would propose forgetting the Father's merciful heart. And he tells and had 2 sons. So now we're into this teaching more officially. Act 1. There's going to be 3 acts that it kind of breaks into. First one, we're just titling Leaving Home. It's about these 2 lost sons. We'll be looking at Luke 13. And home, I'm kind of using as, I'm putting that onto the text a little bit. But home, I think, in the parable really symbolizes the prodigal heart of the Father. It's not really so much about a space or a place as it is the heart, relationship, trusting, loving connection to the heart of the Father. And remember, prodigal means recklessly extravagant, almost wasteful with how joyfully the Father's heart overflows. Okay. So a man had 2 sons. I'll read this. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the estate I have coming to me." So as we study this, I do want to give you, I probably could have put this at the beginning, but I'm doing it now, 3 resources helpful for me. I've got 2 of them here if you want to look at them. You're going to see a lot of quotes from this one called The Cross and the Prodigal. It's Luke 15 through the eyes of Middle Eastern peasants. It's written by Kenneth Bailey, who's now passed away. He was a biblical scholar who lived in the Middle East, and he has super duper helpful insights into Middle Eastern culture that just bring to life especially the Gospels. He's also, if you may have heard of the book, Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes. He also wrote Paul Through Mediterranean Eyes. So super helpful. We'll quote from him to help us see things that I don't think, at least I don't, naturally see, because I'm not part of the Middle Eastern culture into which this parable was told. There's also a great book by Henri Nouwen. I don't know how to actually say it, but it's called The Return of the Prodigal Son. We won't be quoting from that, but I've read it. It's who knows where my Todd Stewart's lost books are. They are not on my shelf. Somebody borrowed it. If it's you, please repent and deliver it back. It's a great story. He's got some great insights that influenced me. I taught this series the first time back in 2011 when I was pastor at New Hope Church. So that's where some of this come from. And then the one I've already referred to, The Prodigal God, Recovering the Heart of the Christian Faith. Very short, very helpful book by Tim Keller. The other see, and it might be worth reading in your own quiet time or just your own time if you want to in this retreat, Genesis 25 through 35 is the story of Jacob and Esau. And as Jesus tells this story, I'm telling you, the audience immediately is thinking about their roots, their heritage. Jacob was in a sense, the son who left home, took the inheritance, which we'll find out about in a second, and he was all over the place. Jacob is the one who then his name was changed to Israel. So he's kind of like, he is the father of the Jewish people. And his older brother was Esau, the one who stayed home. So there's some insights to that they're drawing to. Jesus is saying a lot in this parable. So hopefully that'll come out. So back to the parable. The younger of the 2 sons said to his father, "Father, give me of the estate I have coming to me." So what was he asking for here? Just to give us a picture, he was asking, so inheritance customs at the time, since he's the younger son, that means he would get 1/3 of the estate. The older son was entitled to 2/3 of the estate. And the inheritance, they Venmo'd him a bunch of money, or gave him, hey, here's the access codes to the 401k, son. The inheritance would primarily be in land, not cash. This was not a cash society. So he wants his 1/3 share. He wants land, the hard, literal, material resources, not cash. What he's asking for, it's not that unusual for the father to entrust possession of the inheritance and management of it to the sons ahead of time. So it's not that weird, a little weird, not that weird. He's wanting, though, not only possession, like overseeing it, but disposition rights. That means the right to dispose of it and do with it as he will. And that totally was unheard of. We'll look at that in a second. So what he's like, "Dad, give me the stuff, but I don't want any responsibilities within the family. I don't want," because with inheritance in that time, you not only got stuff, you ultimately, the most valuable thing you inherited was duties and responsibilities. But this dude, as we'll see, he just wants the stuff. Literally to hell with the family, as we'll see. So what else is going on here? Because there's more. So Bailey has some good. He, again, lived in the Middle East, taught in the Middle East. He would ask Middle Eastern peasants, literally alive during his day, he would kind of tell them the story without saying it's a story in the Bible, and just see kind of how they would respond. He would say this. He said, "Has anyone ever made such a request like this in you?" And they said, "Never." I mean, he said hundreds and hundreds of times he interviewed Middle Eastern peasants during his lifetime, and he always got the same response. Nobody's ever made this kind of request. And Bailey would say, could anyone ever make such a request? The villagers reply, it's impossible. And he says, if anyone ever did, what would happen? They replied, his father would become very angry and refuse. To which Bailey would say, why? And the answer always was, because the request clearly means he wants his father to die. He wants to be done with the relationship with the Father. I don't want you in my life. I don't want you telling me what to do with the stuff. I want a clean break. I don't care about you, and I want my family. I want to do my own thing. And so this was the big thing, as we read along in this story, the big sin, if you will, or the big wrongdoing that the younger son does. It's not breaking a law formally. His father's heart. And in that culture, doing what he did came with immense consequences, as we'll see. The other thing we need to know, too, is this is happening in a Middle Eastern village environment. Very different than us private Western American folks. To this day, I've never lived in Middle Eastern villages, but from what others have said and what Bailey said, it's still the same today. Everything happens with an audience. People are around all the time. You never say anything in private. There's always people listening. People are just right on top in each other's business. So when the son makes the request of the father, he's doing it and everybody knows he's doing it. He's bringing shame upon not only himself, but he's bringing shame upon his father. Well, here's how the father responds. It says, so he slapped the snot out of him and put him in prison or whatever. He chose to distribute the assets to them. Remember that. Keep that in mind. The younger son requested it. Well, the father is a symbol of God. But the father distributed the assets to both the older and younger son. That's really important to keep in mind as we go through this. So the father makes the choice to give the younger son what he wanted, even though it hurt him immensely. He did that because the father's priority is to reconcile with his younger son. So whenever there's pain, whenever there's difficulty, whenever there's wrong that happens, somebody has to take on the suffering and pain that comes with it. And that's a side insight. Like when we say we have a conflict with someone, somebody wrongs us, and they come to us and ask us to forgive them, what we are saying is, I will absorb the pain and suffering from the wrong you have done to me so that we can restore our relationship. And I would definitely pass that wrongdoing on to the Lord, because you can't probably bear it very well. So the father takes on the pain and suffering that comes from his son's choices and his actions. Okay. That's what's happening. All of that's happening, and probably even more than that. Verse 13. Somebody read that. It's kind of towards the bottom, the larger text. After the father distributed the assets to them.
Not many days later, the younger son gathered together all he had and traveled to a distant country, where he squandered his estate in fruitless living.
So you're probably familiar with that, but that's what happens with the younger son. What else is going on here? Okay, I could use help if somebody wants to read. Bailey, somebody who can see it. Can you guys see from the back, Corey? I'll ask you. You guys can see it okay? Somebody read that for us.
Might lose 1/3 of their total wealth, leaving the staggering loss of the entire family coin. The parable specifically states that the prodigal sold his affairs in a few days. This means that he liquidated his assets in a hurry, which in turn indicates a sale at any price. The economic gains of generations will be lost in a few days.
Yeah, so try to let that sink in. So what the son is doing, again, it's not, hey, give me my bag of cash. It's not give me my CD, my bonds, whatever. It's give me the right to the land. And then after not many days, so really quickly, he sells it and then he skedaddles, gets out of town. That means he's selling really low to make money, make whatever money he can super fast because he wants to get the heck out of Dodge. And generations would have been building this wealth. And so it is, not only has he already slapped his father in the face by saying he wanted his inheritance ahead of time, but now he's squandering the money, the wealth that the family had earned. And he's also alluded to, he's also squandering his real source of security. Because his real source of security isn't the wealth. His source of security in Middle Eastern cultural environments, relationship within the family and within the community, that is where you find security, status. So the son is squandering the wealth and he's squandering his status. He's spitting on everything that has been given to him. Question for us. How do you think you would have felt if you, just let it fly? How would you have felt? I am a father and I can kind of taste this a little bit.
I think it would have been really hard to not point out those facts. Like, do you realize the request that you're asking?
Yeah.
Do you know what's going to happen with these, all these kiddos coming behind you?
Right.
What a financial impact this is going to have.
Right.
I don't think I could have kept quiet.
Yeah. Yeah. It would have been really hard to keep quiet. I cannot keep quiet about asking my children, my daughter, to pick up her dang cups in the kitchen that she's not picked up, or in the living room. Put them in the kitchen. Put them in the dishwasher would be even better. I can't keep quiet about that, much less squandering 1/3 of the wealth that's been accumulated and passed down through generations and publicly making mockery of my name and my family's name and not caring about it. So I would have had a hard time being quiet too, Susan. Yeah. Yes, we're together. Thomas.
My first thought was, it would just be like a gut punch.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah.
Like nothing like.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably pretty accurate for what the audience was expecting of the dad or the father. Yeah. Shockingly unloving, ungrateful. Somebody else?
I feel like I would feel shameful about if I was the father, about my father. Like, he did so much work to build this wealth.
Oh, yeah?
And then, like, the child that I raised.
Yeah.
Like, he would feel bad about the generational.
Yeah. Yeah. Got a little Yellowstone, and if you ever watched that show, yeah, John Dutton feeling indebted to his prior generations. Yeah. Yeah, good thought. Anybody else?
I think it would just be a sad realization that your kid who you also have unconditional love for them, and to feel like, oh, my son just has unconditional love.
Yeah.
It might feel like, oh, nobody loves me to get something that I would be in there, not that he doesn't care about me.
Yeah.
It's like you realization just when you have that.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a parable. It's just a drop down. What's the history of their relationship? There actually isn't one because these aren't real people. But yeah, I mean, still, yeah, feels fake. Was anything real? any of the love that we had for one another.
I think he said, oh, God, this is only hope of maybe having reconciliation later is to bring the assets. I don't think I have that hope. I don't
Yeah.
think I'm thinking, like,
Would you want to be reconciled? That's a question.
desire of
Yeah.
just wanting to be reconciled. No. I think that would be a concept. Okay, I'll do it. Let's not oppose it.
Oh man, I know myself. I think my wife could probably say how I would respond. Be like, no, there is not going to be reconciliation, son. Until you come and do something incredibly extravagant to me. Yeah, pitiful. Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, just pissed.
Yeah, there it is. Write that in the notes, everybody. Pissed.
Get out.
Yeah,
Get out.
yeah,
Culturally, I know this is a big story, but culturally, would he have just disowned his son?
Yeah.
Like, I would just be like, hey, you know,
yeah.
I would think back then.
We're going to look into that some, like what was the audience expecting the
Yeah.
father to do? Yeah, already he's done something and merciful that would have been shocking. Because more like slapping him around, tying him up, dragging him through the village square, like that's not too extreme for their expectations. What about this question? Because this is at least actually what I don't see in this story. How do you think you would have felt if you were the older son? Really mad.
Yeah, because you're impacted by the younger son's decision, and the father has a say over what happens, and you have no control. You're just like left
Yeah.
up to you.
Right. And that's kind of how we operate. There's actually some cultural stuff that the audience would have seen that it's like the older son should have been doing this, that, or the other, but to us it's not our culture. But yeah, still it would have been upset. What are the thoughts?
Maybe some guilt and responsibility, like I'm the older son. Should
Yeah.
I say something?
Yeah. And that's getting at more what it should have been like in their culture. So let's move on from that one. Okay, what else is going on here? Okay, so this is where we kind of dive deeper into the culture. The older son refused to be the mediator. He's just completely silent. And the silence, at least for me, for years reading this story, like I didn't think of the older son in this story up to this point. The audience is not only thinking of the younger son, they're also very aware of what the older son is doing or is not doing. So somebody read the rest of that, if you will. So the older son refused to be the mediator.
And the two parties never make up for it. To do so, someone would have to lose space, which is
Yeah, so this is Eastern culture. This is, some of you are familiar with this. It's really different than our culture. It's a shame-based culture, and the worst thing that can happen is losing face, carrying shame publicly, especially. So that's what you never want to do. Lose face. Go ahead, Eric.
The process of reconciliation takes place for a third party called the mediator.
Yes.
This go-between happens between one party and the other until both sides can accept. There can be no other.
Yes. And so this, to us, is pretty kind of unfamiliar stuff. But everybody, just remember, everybody listening to Jesus speaking, to them, this is common sense. This is how life works. So they know that for reconciliation to occur, it's things are too bad for it to be the father and the younger son directly reconciling. There needs to be a mediator. There is a clear person in this story who should be fulfilling the mediator, the older son. But he doesn't do it. Let's go back to verse 13. Not many days later, just remember what's going on. The younger son gathered together all he had. He just sold in a bargain basement sales. And he traveled to a distant country. Traveling time, you see it in the New Testament as Paul traveled as well. Traveling any distance was super duper dangerous. People didn't do it. That's where people got killed. That's where robbers Didn't just say they give me your billfold, they like beat the crap out of him. Good Samaritan story. Like that's really what the kind of stuff that happened. They didn't just have, cheap airfare they could go get and just gallivant all over the place. Travel was scary and super duper dangerous. So that's something else we need to know that's going on. The younger son is doing this. So what should the older brother have done? What he should have done was several things, but two big ones I'll put on the screen. He should have appealed to his younger brother to remember his father's heart, to not surrender his security in the home. Things like that. He should have made an appeal for him not to do what he'd been doing. And then at the end, as he left to go to these foreign lands, he should have literally stood up in the way and tried to stop his brother from the very real dangers of travel, foreign lands, of going out with literally nobody on his side. But again, the silence to the original audience, the older brother is painfully silent. And in his silence, he is defiant. Defiant also against the father's heart. He had a chance to fight for the father's heart by trying to reconcile, talk to his brother, but he doesn't. He doesn't. In fact, as we read along in the story, kind of keep this in the back of your mind. Some commentators say that the audience was probably thinking the older brother actually might very well be a big part of why the younger brother wanted to leave home. We're never told why the younger brother wanted to leave. He just wanted to get the heck out of there. He's had enough. This place is, for whatever reason, is not good for him. And remember the audience, he's talking to the scribes and the Pharisees who are upset with the tax collectors and sinners. And Jesus might be pointing out, the younger brother or the older brother in his silence, his defiance, his treatment of the younger brother over the years is making it hard for the brother to stay close to his father's heart. Just a thought to kind of keep in there. So, as we kind of wrap up, we got a few more specific thoughts here. So again, this is just Act 1, and it's kind of setting the stage for us to really get on in the story. Later on this afternoon, we'll talk about, so this was about leaving home, the younger son leaving home, but the older son, he's home, but he's still far from the father's heart. He's defiant, and we'll learn more about him later. So with the original alluded to, the story is already clearly mirroring Jacob and Esau's story, which is Israel's origin story, which of course Israel, the Israelites, the Jews are the people that Jesus is talking to. Jesus is a Jew. The Pharisees and scribes are saying we're the ultimate examples of Judaism. And Jesus is just kind of putting it right in their face like, you remember Father Jacob? How he wandered from home, how he tricked his brother out of his inheritance. It's really conniving. How he eventually wrestles with God, finally is humbled and experiences the Father's mercy and grace that he did nothing to deserve. And then his name is changed from Jacob to Israel. And that's the founding of our people. Remember, you're acting a lot more like Esau in that story, a hard-hearted kind of rebel of a man. So anyway, that's one conclusion the audience is already pondering. The story is already clearly mirroring the lives of those. They are already starting to figure out, the scribes and Pharisees are like, I think he might be saying we're the silent, defiant older brother, and these, they're like all ready to pile on. Yeah, these tax collectors and sinners, they're like the younger brother. Disrespect, no honor within them, going their own way. So the audience is already thinking about those things. There's tension that's already existing in the story. As it's, remember, the original audience, it's being rolled out line by line. They don't know the rest of the story that we'll get to, and you already know. There's tension on various. For us, some conclusions to ponder in addition to these things that we've already talked about. I think this story already is highlighting this. We all wander from the heart of the Father. So all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All of us have wandered from the heart. And there's nuance within this, but there's really two kinds of wandering that are predominant in the human race. There's younger brother type of wandering, and there's older brother type of wandering. With the younger brother, to simplify it a little bit at this point, the younger brother doesn't seem to think about others, just obsessed with himself. The older brother seems like he's got it a lot more together, but he is silently defiant. Remember, he's very critical of others. We'll see he is duper self-righteous and critical of his brother later on. The younger brother, his actions are loud. His words are loud. His defiance is loud. The older brother is defiant, but in a silent, self-righteous, loyal kind of way. And we'll see later, his defiance is based on his own goodness and him doing all the right things. The younger brother, his kind of wandering is really self-absorbed. The older brother's kind of wandering is really self-righteous. Neither one is able to love anybody very well. And both the younger brother and the older brother are both far from the Father's heart. Very clear in the story to the original audience. Maybe a little less clear to us. They're far from home. They're far from the Father's heart. So last question for us before I open it up, just for some questions and comments and then we'll get into Act 2 later on today. Which way do you tend to wander? Are you more of a younger brother kind of wanderer or an older brother kind of wanderer? What do you think? Share with a crowd of people at a retreat. Which way do you tend to wander? Whoops.
I would say, like, I identify a lot with this story. It's like, one, I am an older brother. Two, I have a sister who did leave home in a loud way.
Yeah.
Like, I experienced this, like, kind of like firsthand when I was in high school. And I see that in, like, my relationship with God, too. Like, I'm not one to, like, go out and, like, go crazy or nothing.
Yeah.
But I'm very violent, but still kind of give God a shaft.
Yeah.
And that's what happened, like, with my sister. Is like, I was really sad and upset, but I didn't do too much.
Yeah.
Like, usually when I hear this, I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like I can vastly between the two, younger and
Sure.
older. So like when I see like I'm acting like the younger brother and try to like get myself together, then I just start acting more like an older brother.
And looking down on others who don't have their stuff together, right? Whatever way we think their stuff should be together, right? The gauge is almost always my gauge, right? The thing that I care about. I'm like you. I would, especially in my younger years, I am an older brother, but I was, wandering, doing whatever kind of life of pleasure. But it's real easy, the older I get, to be critical of others.
Yeah, I was going to say, I tend to be viewed as, obviously, I'm the youngest in the family. And so everybody says, oh, you're the young, spoiled one.
Yeah.
Because I make jokes and whatever it might be. But when I view my kids, I think of myself probably as the older brother, and I would never have done that.
Yeah, suddenly we forget.
Yeah, I forget how shitty I was as a kid.
Yeah.
I would say that, because I have a twin brother, and honestly, I definitely decided to find like my brothers but not as much.
Yeah.
And like, especially came to like, not wanting my parents said or whatever. So I was just very, so I would say yes.
Yeah. Other thoughts? Taking the next step. which is how do you relate to God? Because ultimately he's the Father. His heart is the one we've wandered from. Are you, who are you more like there? It's kind of interesting. I vacillate. Something to think about and discuss. Sit around the dinner table and talk about how you wander from God. Fun conversation. Questions, comments, testimonies that I haven't hit with any of the discussion questions. Again, we're Act 1. It's kind of the priming the pump a little bit here. Yeah, Becca.
I had never really made the connection between prodigal sons and Jacob and Esau.
Yeah.
But it's only you'll go more into Jacob and Esau's relationship.
Not a ton this weekend.
So
but we should all read Genesis 25 through 35 and see what insights we can come up with.
It's just even just knowing even from the time they were born, when they were in the womb, there was conflict.
Yes.
And it even goes on even further that Jacob is the father of Israel, Esau is the father of Edom, and the two hated each other. The nations hated each other for however many thousands of years.
Long, maybe even up till now.
Yeah. And
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know as much about the nation of Israel versus the nation of Edom.
Yeah.
In between the two, but I wonder if they're from there even takes those characteristics.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't have time. I don't feel like, at least this weekend, to dive. I had a lot of tension about that. I wanted to, but it just kind of ironically, I saw God. I mean, I've been reading in Genesis, and I've been reading the story of Jacob and Esau. Jacob's story is longer, but so the story of Jacob. And then I was studying for this, and I'm like, wait a second. This thing connects here. Isaac, in the story of Jacob and Esau, Isaac, the dad, is inept at best. And Rachel, the mom, is, Rebecca's the mom. Rebecca is conniving. I mean, it's family. And as they have all this conflict, Jacob's gone, Jacob's returning home, Isaac I had to keep looking around, did he die? I don't remember him dying. He's still alive. He's just nowhere to be found. The silent father. There's layers all over. Spoiler alert, the father in this story is not silent. He's aggressively loving. So yeah, there's connections big time. It's pretty interesting.
As far as older and younger brother, it was just 5 minutes because they were twins.
Right. Are you older or younger? You're the older one. Interesting.
I have never caught before ever, period. Maybe this is, but the older brother got his portion too.
Yeah, they both did.
I always read it as the one guy comes to him and then the younger brother I want
Me too.
So that is interesting. I'm excited to see. Because then I always feel bad for the older brother. Well, he didn't get his, and if he's being faithful.
He got his. Yeah. I'm with you, though, until I, really dug into this the first time. And like I said, you often don't really learn things that deeply until I study them to teach them. And when I studied this to teach it the first time, they both got their inheritance. What's the older brother doing here? Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
Super interesting here, the failures of the older son. Because I was saying, I've always read that story and thought it's so easy to see the sin of the younger son because he's louder. Actions are more outward and inward, and where it's the sin of omission versus the sin of commission. see what's going on, and the older brother's part
Yeah.
is quiet.
Yep.
And so it's really easy to be like, oh yeah, the older brother is righteous, like he's doing things right. And so
Yeah.
it's hard to understand, like, okay, now wait, why is the dad upset with the older brother? Because it seems like he's supposed to do it.
Yeah, so I agree, because so much so at the end, spoiler alert again, when the older brother gives his little speech where he's upset, like, you're doing all this stuff for the younger son, and I've been awesome. It's kind of, internally, I'm like, yeah, he's been awesome. What's going on here? But it's because we haven't seen things that are there. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Just to clarify why the father was not saying no.
Why didn't he just say no? I assume that would not have fit Jesus's parable to talk about his how the parable ends. Yeah. But yeah, we will see, again, I keep alluding to all this stuff to come, but we will see in Eastern society, the expectation most definitely was that the father would say no. Not just, no, I'm sorry, son. Thanks for your request. Emphatic no with dire consequences for that younger son. So he says yes, and that's already crazy.
Would they usually get the inheritance at the father's death?
Yeah. Although, like I said, it wasn't unheard of that it would be, they would have possession and manage and stuff, but have the ability to sell it off and do all that like the younger son wanted and did. That was real bad. Real bad. Yeah.
I think we all would like to be rather relate to the younger brother. Maybe this is just me, but it's like, I would rather see myself as like, I went way more, but I returned. I realized the error of my ways and I messed up.
Yeah.
But the older brother who's self-righteous, like, even, it's been mentioned, like, the Pharisees, we rag the Pharisees because they're so self-righteous. Like, Jesus had a heart for the Pharisees.
Yeah.
He said at one point, I love the wait to some other hands, but you're not willing. He has a heart for them. And I think it's hard for us to admit. Like, when you put the question up, I was like, oh, younger brother for sure. But then as I thought about it more, I was like, no, I'm definitely more of an older brother. And that's hard to admit. It's ironic. It's not but, like, it is. And so I love that you're holding in on that because it doesn't get enough airtime. The top pernicious self-righteousness is in us to look down.
Yeah. A good word, pernicious. Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. So, well, I don't want to spoil every teaching, but there's more to look into in terms of how the younger as well. It's not all that humble. So we'll look at that in a bit, or this afternoon. Anybody else? Yeah, Michael.
Well, first I will say what you will say to what I will say.
Okay.
You'll say it was these other teaching people, but I appreciate how I was just thinking about last retreat, going through Psalms, and how slowly you sit and lay things out, because it really does help. Like what you said in your own study, we're so culturally far from this that we spend a lot of time to get to what we need to.
Yeah.
So I just appreciate that. Even now, like when you were teaching, I was like, I forgot this is 3 lessons. Like you could have done this in an hour and then we go to another parable. So I appreciate this slowness.
Cool.
And it makes my mind, I don't know, I feel like a kid getting a story read to me, like what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I know you would say it's the other people, but.
What if I would just say, yeah, man, I'm awesome.
Self-righteous, silent.
That's right. Yeah, so the retreat, I mean, one of our big strategic priorities this year is helping us all to grow in our relating personally to God. And so that was one of that priority was really what we did at the retreat. So I was actually down the road a decent amount with teaching through some other kind of Psalms part 2 kind of thing, which probably would have been good. But then I was just thinking, I don't know that I think techniques and I relate to God, and which is why I'm having some testimonies and just like, how does Riley relate to God through music? What's that like? That's not my forte. So it's good to have some of that. But the gift that'll keep on giving in terms of us relating personally to God, becoming convinced of how deeply we need the Father's mercy and his heart, and becoming convinced of his heart for us. And as I'm convinced of that, like, I'll find a way to relate to God, whether it's talking to him, reading his word, listening to songs, whatever it is. That's kind of why, you weren't asking this, but that's why we ended up doing it. I'm like, also, it's like it's a retreat. When I'm at a retreat, I want to slow down in every way the word slow could be used. And so let's slow down in the text. Let's relate to the Father's heart. Yeah. Thanks for saying that. Anybody else? Why don't we close in some prayer? A few of you guys pray, and then we'll take a break. This afternoon's free to do whatever. It's pretty cold. Basketball knockout. I don't know if that's happening or not, but Corey's always in charge of that. I don't know why. She won the first year, and I think we decided she's in charge. I don't know.
Stewart boys bring back.
Yeah, Stewart boys. So yeah, then we'll. Gosh, what did I put in my own schedule? 4:30? Yeah, 4:30 we will have the second teaching, and then we'll have supper after that. So let's pray. A few of you guys pray. We're at a retreat. We don't have anything else to do. Is maybe pray. Go for it. And then I'll close this.
God, I pray that we really would understand your mercy more as we study this passage slowly, and that would just propel us towards you and towards finding ways to connect with you.
Please be word, God, that there's just example after example in the New Testament of people that are really messed up. Really gone far from your design for our life, but yet you bring them back to you and are gracious and grateful that you do that for us as well today. So just that reminder, and I thank you for Todd's preparation with this, and that we do have this space to just time reading through your word and just continue to teach us as the time goes on this weekend, what more you want us to learn and how we can apply that to our lives.
We pray, God, that you will really become more real to us this weekend through this time, and even specifically through this text, that we may cognitively be able to grasp your heart for us, the lengths to which you have gone to pursue us, but I pray we would even just like feel the depths of your love for us, and be more than just a moment kind of buzz, but like a deep soul level sense of joy at your extravagant love for us. So whatever you need to do, Holy Spirit, for each one of us to with you in that way, that's what I ask for. Amen.